And the other celebrity that you have come across there is the singer of Megadeth. Could you go over that?
Oh, yeah, him. He was able to use the device. He wasn't there very long. I think this was late 90s, early 2000s. He was there, but he was able to use the device, and like Alex trained him how to use it.
So he was picked early as a kid, a child.
I'm sure, but he just didn't. They didn't get around to bringing him by there, and he wasn't that good at it, which is why he didn't last very long. So.
Oh, so there's a hierarchy.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't remember anything, right?
Well, if you look at his music, he certainly seems to. I mean, look at his songs.
He's definitely in the cloning chambers, that's for sure.
He definitely knows something.
But that's not to say that there's any like affiliation or preference when it comes to celebrities. It's just the few and far between, right?
Yeah. Unless you're talking about, like, I mean, military celebrities, but that's a whole other thing. But...
Well, what did you come across there in terms of heads of state or something like
that? We had occasional visits from, well, we would always get visits from people high up in the intelligence community. We got visits from Joint Chiefs of Staff. We got visits occasionally from either politicians or high-up military officers from the other countries we were working with, from Britain, Canada, France, whatever. And we had... I've never even mentioned this to anyone before, but this is a thing. I can remember actually at one point training elite kids, or Illuminati kids, how to use the device. I can remember training one of the Bush kids, Bush Jr., when he was a kid, was there. There's an actress who was there whose name I can't for the life of me remember.
But they were in cahoots with the Illuminati.
Oh, very much so, yes.
So, but at the same time, in the end, they were kind of neutral. So what does that tell us? That even the Illuminati aren't the be-all end-all, or?
That, and like, they weren't, the Illuminati weren't in control of much, and they still aren't. It's, like I said, it's mostly, ultimately, under the direction of the Tall Whites. But the Illuminati was also not going to let this opportunity slip by to know how to use this thing. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And what can you tell us about the timeline, or maybe it was alternate, maybe it wasn't, where Russia won the Cold War?
In that one, the U.S. became really, really weak financially, and it eventually, by now, balkanized, kind of like how Russia is kind of on the verge of doing now. And there was eventually Russia's borders expanded all the way to France, and there was a genocide of Germans, actually, by the Russians. And I'm trying to think what else happened. Scottish independence happened in that timeline. But then the independent Scotland became essentially a Russian puppet.
So I'm getting that at one point this possibility was the most likely, and you caught wind of that with the holograms and then inserted yourself to avert it.
Yes.
And which part didn't you like?
Pretty much all of it.
Okay.
It was not a good timeline at all.
So when it's really rotten is when you intervene.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into the one in planet Typhon?
Oh, sure. Typhon is a hub planet, which is a planet. I'm still not entirely sure who administers them, but there are planets here and there where tons of species will go and live in an integrated community, and it's also a trading hub on the Galactic Highway. It's like the Silk Road as a planet, kind of.
And it was represented in Star Wars.
It was?
I think it was the one with the skyscrapers all around.
Oh, yeah. It was like that, except it did have like oceans and occasional like patches of wilderness here and there. But Typhon, it's a tropical paradise planet for one thing, and what we were doing there, we went there pretty regularly, but what we were doing there on time I specifically remember was we were infiltrating the trade network. We were trying to pass ourselves off as pirates, and we did a pretty good job. And there was some species or some movement on a planet, like political movement, I mean, that was getting weapons, and we didn't want them getting weapons, so we had to infiltrate the black market. And yeah, the details are fuzzy, but like, my kid was conceived on Typhon, and it's a really beautiful, amazing planet, and I miss it.
So it was one of those idyllic ones, rare ones.
Yeah.
But it was not a life mission.
No, that was around like 5 or so years, I'd say.
And when you say you conceived, I mean, you fathered a child there.
Yeah.
Did you get to return him with no objection from anyone?
No, there was no objection. There weren't any rules against having kids.
In fact, it was encouraged.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a new asset, so, I mean, yeah.
Right. And you even ended up taking him under his wing, your wing in the program, and teaching him the ropes there.
Yes.
Such as using the looking glass itself.
Yes. I trained him how to do that. He and his mother were snatched from me when he was 8 years old. On Europa. That's a really difficult story to tell. But he was then taken to Montauk for mind fracturing, and he was mind fractured eventually, so he was not spared that. Even having been born in the program, he was not spared that.
With all your influence, you could not put up a fight there?
No, could not.
And before that, you had written a song for him.
Yeah.
That later trickled into mainstream, which is, you're convinced that you wrote this song, and then it showed up somehow in a movie.
Yeah. Well, that happened a lot in both Montauk, Looking Glass, Nachtwaffen, all of these projects. The songs we wrote wound up getting stolen or sold and put into the mainstream. But this one, I may as well. Shall I just say what it is? Or
yeah, go ahead.
A Whole New World from Aladdin. My kid, he was absolutely terrified of the Looking Glass device and terrified of learning to use it. I don't exactly know why, but it just absolutely petrified him. And so I decided to write a song and make it seem appealing. And
what year was this?
He was 5, so this would have been 1983.
Long before the movie came out.
Yes.
And you are convinced that it couldn't have been some sort of, subconscious or retroactive, activation of memory, that you actually composed every note of that?
I'm pretty convinced. I mean, of course, I can't say for certain that it wasn't, inserted in some way, maybe via, V2K or something. But, as far as I'm aware, yes, I wrote it.
But that means that it's not just Donald Marshall and the like that are made to by force supply this inspired music, but also other projects that are not necessarily subliminal. Do you have a theory as to how they make their way there in the mainstream?
Sometimes we would go and sell them to people. This is a Montauk thing. If you want to know the details of this, you should watch my Fractal Weapons interview, demystifying the Montauk project. But what we would do sometimes is I would pass myself off as the devil and say I was selling people were selling their souls in exchange for music. And I would put on a gray suit and walk through a portal and use and communicate telepathically, and especially if you're a superstitious person, which musicians are notorious for being, you'd probably at least believe it if someone said, "Hey, I'm the devil," if you walked through a portal.
Yeah.
And were telepathically communicating with someone.
But this was Montauk. This was not Looking Glass.
No, this was not Looking Glass. Looking Glass, I genuinely don't know how our songs wound up in the mainstream. My best guess is that someone was secretly recording them.
Or maybe Alex did it and you just haven't reintegrated that memory.
Maybe.
Right. And let's go to maybe similarly pleasant experience, which was an espionage one in Florence.
Oh, yeah, where my kid was born.
Another kid?
No, same one.
Wait, was he not born on Typhon?
He was conceived on Typhon.
I see.
We went
Good.
back. He was conceived towards the end of that mission anyway, and so we went back. Then we were in Florence. In Florence, we were monitoring the development of aerospace technology. There were some early experiments with hot air balloons and stuff happening there. Pretty rudimentary. But
were you encouraging them, or were you trying to subvert?
We were encouraging it, and we were actually giving tips on how to do that. Yeah.
The anti-Montauk.
Yeah. And the kid was born 5 weeks early. And there was kind of a hilarious thing where in the panic, none of us, neither me nor my wife, Melanie, yes, I do have permission to mention her name, not who she actually is, but her alter, Melanie. There was kind of a panic because neither of us could remember a single word of Italian in that scenario, so that we had a guy with us who was actually translating, she's in labor, we need to get to a hospital, blah, blah, blah. So my kid was born ultimately in the Ospedale degli Innocenti in Florence, which nowadays it's a museum. It's still there. And
so he's in their records.
Presumably. He must be.
Wouldn't that be a cool way to verify?
Yeah.
Or maybe they covered it up.
I don't know if their records would have survived that long.
The same way that they obscured all of Bob Lazar's credentials.
His records at Area 51 are still there. My kids are still there at Area 51. But the birth records, we're talking 1700s, maybe even late 1600s Italy. 2 world wars and a ton of smaller ones. Would they have even survived that long? Maybe, maybe not.
Oh, but I think you omitted to mention how far back in time. So when you said you didn't speak Italian, normally, I'm guessing that normally would have been given this download or something before, but it just didn't happen that time?
We did for most of the mission, but just in the panic of her being in labor, we just could not remember it for the life of us. It was quite funny.
Do they deal with cover memories at all?
No, not cover memories, no.
Because JDFC did. They used it as a tactic.
They did use that as a tactic. Looking Glass does not.
Cool. But they do install like knowledge through block downloads through technology.
Yes. They
Right.
do download like languages and occasionally even like skill sets, things like that.
Like Matrix.
Yeah.
And in the ET programs that deal with time manipulation, is it more of a feature of the negatively oriented or another gray zone?
It's also a gray zone.
Right.
Some of the bad ones do it a lot, like the Aldebaranites. They do it a lot, but most of the time it's kind of just a thing that happens a lot of the time, really and truly. Like, when time travel technology exists, you can't really stop people from doing it, so a lot of times, even the really positive ones are going to have to do it for defensive purposes.
Right. And have the Looking Glass officials ever had disputes with Time Corps or police or some sort of high authority?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, that happens. We've dealt with the Time Police. They're far older than us, and usually if we come into a dispute with them, then we have to give up whatever we're doing. But we've also implanted moles in the Time Police before, and some of those moles are still active. And I'm sure that they've implanted moles in Looking Glass. Like, I know they have moles in Montauk. I know that. I'm sure they have.
Which we should say is still ongoing, Montauk, despite not being in the same location.
Yeah.
And would you say where it is?
It's in New Orleans, in underneath an abandoned naval base, which is in the middle of the city at 4400 Dauphine Street. People can look this place up; it exists. And the project is happening in a dome underneath that is also in a time bubble, much like the original one.
Wow. And could you give one or two examples of like dangerous scenarios for humanity that have been, successful beside the Cold War one?
Yes, there was one where we were invaded by an insectoid species in 2017, I believe. And in that one, within 10 years, humanity was essentially made into a Borg for all intents and purposes. And some people managed to escape and become refugees off planet, but most of Earth became a Borg planet.
But those don't happen every day. These are more extreme, right?
Yes.
Cases.
Yes.
Because it seems unmanageable otherwise. And they saw it play out in like over years, at least 2, right?
Oh yes, yeah.
And what was the tactic they employed?
Going back in time and using military force to stop this invasion from happening in the first place.
Right. So, in a sense, they are beneficial for humanity when our goals align, so to speak.
Yeah. It's never out of the goodness of their hearts, but they do good things for us, like
Pretty
anyone
much
else.
comparable with Solar Warden.
Yeah, pretty much comparable with like most of these projects.
Okay, yeah. What about situations where missions went terribly awry?
Oh, I can remember one time it was supposed to be a life mission, but he got caught doing something. I still don't remember what exactly he got caught doing, but he was on this planet in a little apartment. He was infiltrating a plant of some kind, like I think biomedical research that was on this planet, and he got caught. His cover was blown, and I can remember fleeing out of this city. It was on a moon somewhere. Not a planet, a moon, sorry. Excuse me, not in this solar system. And I can remember having to sleep under a bridge for several days. awaiting my contact to notice I wasn't showing up for meetings, because that is a thing that they do. They'll send in someone every so often to be debriefed on the continuing of the mission. Anyways, sleeping under this bridge for several days, hiding, getting food from dumpsters and such, before finally someone noticed I wasn't showing up, tracked me, and came and picked me up, and exfiltrated me. I can remember being, one of my avatars was an Asian-looking man who was on a mission in China, and him getting captured, and actually we were unable to exfiltrate him for some reason, and he wound up dying in a Chinese labor camp in the 70s, I think that was.
Mhm. And actually, what was the most regular way that they maintain communication with the operatives outside the mission?
Usually either dead drops, or you would meet someone in public discreetly, like at a restaurant or something.
Mhm. So nothing like chips or direct.
No, they don't quite have that level of technology to communicate across time and space directly.
Right. And how often were they forced to cancel these missions?
Rarely.
Due to anti-telephoning?
Yeah, and we are pretty good at it. Like, it's rare that we fuck up so badly that things have to be completely just thrown out.
So they've amassed the experience and are now having a better success rate.
Yeah.
But they still lose assets even permanently, right?
Occasionally, yes. When they don't use an avatar, when they send the original person, if that person dies and they are unable to recover the body, then that person is gone forever.
Wow.
Which that's extremely rare. I've only known that to happen like maybe 5 times, but it has happened.
Right. And is there ever equipment malfunction that is costly?
Yes. There's been times where the Stargate has malfunctioned, and that's quite expensive to repair, because actually the human technicians actually don't know how to repair it. We have to call in tall white technicians or another species who we outsource that to. So that requires paying for someone to be flown in from off planet usually.
Because it's so sophisticated, or because they're on a need to know?
Both.
Mm-hmm.
Both.
Right. And how many, like a ballpark estimate of how many simultaneous life missions are going on at any given time?
Between 2 and 5. They try not
a
to
lot.
do 2. No, not a lot, because like that'll. You can only stretch your psyche so much. Like.
But we're talking about as far back as millennia.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of that, what's the most they've stretched time and distance?
You mean how far in the future or the past?
And distance, yeah. One by one. Let's start with distance.
Distance, I know we've done missions in the Pegasus galaxy on a couple of planets. Because there is a species from there that has influence here. They're turquoise-skinned humans with black hair and like turquoise eyes as well, and they're around 15 feet tall. I don't know the proper name for them, but they're from the Pegasus galaxy, but they do have political sway in our backyard. And time, going way back, definitely Atlantis. I think even pre-Atlantis.
Do you remember any specific missions?
I can remember being installed in Atlantis as actually a museum curator, of all things. Yes, they did have museums in Atlantis, and of all things, I was sent there to be the curator of this museum because they were bringing in like ET oddities that the Atlantean explorers had found. Because
Wow.
there were Atlanteans who went out and explored the galaxy and probably beyond even. And much like with what we do now, certain cultural oddities or antiquities would be brought in and displayed at this museum. And so I was there as a museum curator, and I would occasionally traffic something over to Area 51 for reverse engineering.
The traffic is a nice way to say smuggle.
Mm-hmm.
But do you remember what it was? Like, was it a staff, a weapon, or technology?
Some weapons technology, yes. I can remember one that was kind of it looked like a spear, but it sent out an energy wave that vaporized whatever was in its path for quite a distance, several thousand feet.
Whoa.
Yeah. That was a nasty motherfucker. And there was one that was... I can remember one... It looked like an innocent statue of a woman, but it was actually a mind control device. It's hard to describe. It would... When you were in its presence, it would make people, like, complacent and, like, almost... It had an almost hypnotic effect. And so I'm sure you can imagine that would be extremely useful in projects. So that was sent to Area 51. And there were some others that I can't exactly remember.
No, that's exclusive. And the people there, what was their skin and height and appearance?
Pretty much they looked just like us. But
Atlantis?
but there were other species there. There were some reptilians. There were actually winged humans. I don't even know what those are. But
Like they were born with them?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There were winged humans. There were the cat people from Lyra.
Were there not also the blue people that you saw in Vega?
Yes, there were. There were.
What about something related to Native Americans? Because presumably the Iroquois, the originals, are pure Atlanteans.
They're Lemurians, actually.
Oh, okay. Casey was wrong then.
Yeah, I don't know who Casey is.
Edgar Casey.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're Lemurians. Atlanteans are mostly Europeans and Africans, whereas Lemurians are mostly
Polynesian and Native American.
Yeah, and a fair number of Asians too, also
right.
in Lemuria.
Interesting. Wow. And yeah, Lemuria doesn't actually stand for the monkey. That's, it stands for spirit or something like that, because it was not as physical back then. But anyway, what about, have you met any famous figures?
Oh yeah. I met Winston Churchill once. We met historical figures, kings and queens. I can recall
anything we would have heard of?
Oh yeah, I can recall a meeting with Queen Isabella in Spain at one point.
Any creatures from really far back, like that are bordering on mythology, like King Arthur or something?
Yeah, we met Egyptian, Greek and Egyptian gods, and even Mesopotamian gods like Marduk and Enki and people like that. And we met, I can literally never remember his name, the Greek god of the festival, Dionysius. We met him once.
And was he chubby?
No, he was actually quite good looking, surprisingly enough. He was not chubby. Maybe he did become chubby in his later years. I don't know.
So all these gods, I mean, are just ETs that have been around back when humans were not quite as ready to worship them, when they have to stop showing up because we were too submissive, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what did Marduk look like? I have to go there.
He looked more reptilian than not. From what I can tell, he is a Draco Anunnaki hybrid. But you can definitely tell, you would never mistake him for a pure Draco or a pure Anunnaki. You would think he was just like some weird reptilian species if he didn't tell you what he is.
And what did he have to do with this mission? I mean, what was his connection to your particular protocol?
We wanted something from his palace in it was near what is now Baalbek, Lebanon. He had a palace there. We wanted something from it. I can't remember what it was.
And did you manage to retrieve it?
After much negotiation, yes. We had to sell him some genetic material so he could print out more slaves for himself. That was pretty much the only payment he would accept, and we eventually gave in.
Did you have any more recent encounters, or because this is allegedly still alive?
He is still alive. That's a topic I actually can't discuss.
That's fine.
Because it's ongoing operations that I think might actually have a good outcome, and I don't.
You don't want to jinx them.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. And do the Looking Glass people lease out their technology to other factions, or what do you think is behind when we hear like Daryl's account of the Looking Glass tech being used?
I think that there's more than one device.
So no affiliation there with this project?
No. I mean, we never leased the device, to my recollection, never left Area 51 and still has not. We did occasionally have agreements where we would let some people come in and use it under strict supervision, but we never let it leave the base. So if other people have one, it's not that exact same physical device. And there's probably more than one kind of device that can achieve that effect as well. So
yeah, because all Looking Glass means is a mirror, so could be anything.
I mean, like I said, the Russians already had one when I got there in 75, 76. The Italians had one. The Czechs had one. By now, I believe there's one in the UK. I know there's one in China by now. So whether these are all the exact same template of device, I don't know.
Right. And how do you know, do they fund their projects? Because, I mean, you would think it's costly.
It's very costly. Well, the Pentagon has an estimated $3 trillion that's just not there at the end of every year.
That's more than that, actually. It's like 30 million. So a trillion, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there's that. We do get actually ET funding, not with currency, but with personnel. And
what about the missions themselves? Are they sometimes rewarding that way?
Yes. Well, sometimes we'll do missions
just as a for. Oh, really?
As a form of payment, we'll do a mission for someone. Like if you let us, like I've talked about, like personnel exchanges and technology exchanges. Like it's a very mercantilist system.
So were there some where the only goal was to make income?
Oh yeah. That's definitely a thing.
And what are the most trafficked items?
Technology and slaves.
Of all species?
Yeah. And also genetic material for people so that they can make so that they can make their own slaves if they want to make, I don't know, chimeras or something.
Right. And maybe give us one like artifact that you were able to retrieve.
Artifact, gosh. I can remember retrieving, we got a lot of scrolls. especially in the early days, and I never knew what was in those scrolls because that wasn't at that point it wasn't my job to know. But we always seemed to be going after scrolls on this planet or that planet, and I remember a lot of weapons we would try and get our hands on as well, and we would also get a hold of ships and such. We would sometimes go to crash retrieval areas, but also we would like acquire them either by force or by trade, and then there would be people who would reverse engineer them.
Was there anything that was beyond their capability of reverse engineering?
Yes, I don't have specific memories, but yes, there were times where they eventually had to like outsource it to an ET and say, "This is just beyond us. What do we do?"
Right. Although humans are very good at that particular.
Yeah, we are.
So you saw scrolls. Isn't that specific to kind of more primitive civilizations? And so some that you have to go through to get to like the papers or eventually to the glass pads? Or is there something special about scrolls?
There must be something special about them because they were used by extremely advanced civilizations. Like, I know the Lyrans are still using them to this day.
That says a lot.
Yeah, they're still using scrolls. Maybe that's also like an element of like conservative traditionalism that they're still using that, but there must be something about them that's special. And we went to a lot of ancient human scrolls that had like I think they had recordings of like rituals and stuff for like how to open portals and or for like places where events had happened in history where we would find stuff like if there had been a recording of like a battle in the sky or something like that. We went after one thing I do specifically remember. We went after Vedic scrolls.
Right.
That had things, and this was in the jungles of I think it was what is now Bangladesh, but back then, of course, it was part of the Mughal Empire. And there was a recording in there, a very detailed one of an ET battle that happened in the skies over somewhere in India, and that a lot of ships had crashed. And after we went through those scrolls, we went there to that site, and we did actually find some stuff had survived in the intervening years.
This technology seems so convenient. I mean, it's out of the most out there science fiction novel that you can see anything you want at any point in time and space, giving you such an unfair advantage.
Yes, I agree. It gives an extremely unfair advantage.
And, I had to ask that whether there were any tours inside the planet, whether in the mantle or the core.
Yes. There was stuff in Hollow Earth, actually, not just Inner Earth, Hollow Earth, where we were. Actually, I did live a life there once. And I was pretty much all I was doing was taking pictures of stuff down in there. What became of all that, where all that went, you need to know, and I don't.
But you weren't mind wiped.
No, I wasn't.
So is it a matter of not being able to tap into those memories?
No, it was a matter of they didn't tell me. I took those pictures and sent them back to Area 51, and after that, I never knew. I was never told what was done with them.
But what else other than the pictures, because you said you lived a whole lifetime?
Oh, yeah. I had a civilian cover life there. The job I had, I worked actually at a refugee intake center there for refugees from ET wars, where Inner Earth is actually a major transit location galactically. A lot of people come in and go out of there all the time. So I worked there. I looked like a normal human. There are normal looking humans down there, of course. And
But are they taller?
A little bit, yeah. They're maybe 6.5 to 7 feet tall, so
Is it
they're
true
not
that they don't speak out loud, but just telepathy?
pretty much, yeah. They do occasionally use a language that sounds similar to Norwegian, actually, of all things. And so that was actually a very peaceful existence there. I was just doing papers for these refugees, either for them to get jobs and stay in Inner Earth, or for them to be moved on to some other planet. And I would walk around and take pictures, either openly where it was allowed, or covertly if I was going to like military areas. And that was actually a pretty idyllic lifestyle I had in a lot of ways.
And what did the camera look like? Because from most of the accounts, we hear that if you were to take one of our cameras there, it would have been completely ineffectual because it's higher density. So I'm assuming it was something out of a sci-fi movie.
It looked just like a normal little tiny spy camera. I'm assuming it must have had some pretty special qualities to it. There's no doubt about that. It didn't look like anything special, and it was on the inside of my jacket, and I think the shutter to click it, I would like fiddle with my jacket pocket, and it would go off. It didn't use film, it was digital in some way.
What can you tell us about the other technologies that you've seen inside there? What is it anything like on the surface?
No, not really. I mean, a lot of it looks similar, but there are. I saw a lot of ships coming, going, of various types. People did have food replicators for meat, especially. They don't slaughter animals down there for meat. They grow meat or get it from a replicator. But some people down there do need meat, especially like reptilians or reptilian hybrids. We do need meat. So it would have to be made in some fashion. And there was farming to an extent, but
And the wildlife as well was not didn't have any animosity towards humans.
there were predators.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were like anaconda things that were quite dangerous. There were locusts that were carnivorous. I remember those.
So
But
pests.
yeah, pests. But generally speaking, there wasn't much hostile wildlife. No.
What was the main method of getting around? Was it hovercraft?
Yes, hovering crafts and also teleportation areas.
Did you have accentuated psychic powers when you were inside versus on the surface?
Yes, I did. My telepathy was even stronger down there. My telekinesis was much stronger down there, even in the programs like off planet. It was stronger. Most people down there had some manifestation capabilities, where they could like manifest simple objects. Only really advanced, like ascended masters, could manifest like machines or things, but like most people could manifest like something simple, like I don't know, a pair of scissors or something like that.
What about did you have or witness the ability to fly?
Yes, I witnessed flying people.
And it was overall extremely peaceful and no such thing as squalor.
No such thing as squalor, not even in like the refugee camps that I was mentioning earlier. Even those were quite idyllic by Earth standards or surface Earth standards.
What's their take on the surface?
Well, your average person down there doesn't really know very much about the surface, but they see us as very backwards and primitive and kind of childlike in a way. And I mean, I can't say I disagree.
So they're not interested, or are, I'm sure they're aware of what's going on here.
They are, yeah. They're only interested insofar as they want to keep it away from them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They're long-lived as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about 1,000 years or so?
Thereabouts, yeah.
What about the way that time passes? Is it true that it's different in the sense that you can't really keep up with it, especially with the fact that there's no day and night cycle?
Yeah. The standard recommended thing is 36 hours awake and then 12 hours of sleep. When there's permanent sunlight, that's usually what people adapt to the best.
So the geography, was it all green and, verdant, or was it also barren?
I wouldn't say barren. There were some like grasslands that were not quite as, they weren't thick with growth. They were just grassy. And there is an ocean. A very nice, you can swim pretty much in all of the ocean there because it's very calm and it's never more than like 100 feet deep.
And no predators?
At any point. I think there are some, but not many. Yeah, there are predators. There are some pretty big eels that are rather dangerous, but they're not common. So,
And there are no major tumultuous weather events like tornadoes, or do they keep that under wrap?
no, there's nothing. It rains, but it's not like thunderstorms or anything really dangerous. There's no lightning, oddly enough. I don't know quite how that would even be, but there's no lightning at all, ever.
But there are clouds.
Yes.
And is the sky blue?
Yes, pretty much.
And the sun, is it 60% of the one in intensity that we are seeing and more towards the white?
It is definitely more white. I don't know about percentage of intensity.
You can look at it more easily.
Yeah.
But definitely can't see the opposite side of the hollow, although you would assume that that's what you would see, but somehow you just see sky, right?
Yeah. Sometimes on a really, really clear day, you can almost kind of see like little bits of mountain peeking through.
Wow.
From the other side, but not really. You can't really see it. If you have a telescope, then you can actually see quite a lot. But
wow, that's great. And in the Gartha, any highlights there? The mantle.
Agartha was a very brief mission that I only remember being there once, and it was only for a few days. So there wasn't a lot that I got to see.
What's their architecture like?
Agarthan architecture is actually like Norse, kind of, and also like early medieval. Northern European, essentially, is what I would say was probably inspired by Agarthan architecture quite heavily.
Sounds like Hyperborean.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my guess, but okay, cool. And was there a prevented 2012 cataclysm that we hear at least two separate looking glass whistleblowers talk about?
I believe so, yes. I believe it was a collision with a very large asteroid. Which, of course, was not an asteroid, it was a ship. A massive ship built by someone. I don't know.
Are we talking Nibiru?
No, it's not Nibiru. It's it was actually abandoned and empty, but it was going to be on a collision course with Earth, and I think we actually sent someone in, and they actually piloted it away from us.
So Looking Glass is directly to thank for this?
I believe so. That might be a different program. I can't for 100% certain say that it was Looking Glass, but I believe it was.
And by the way, do they ever put multiple of these time travel programs in one place and just unite against a common terrible threat?
Yeah, on occasion. We've united with the Montauk people on a number of occasions. We've united with the Chinese time travel program several times. And
Wow. Any other prophecies or such that you can talk about that you have seen?
I know that by the 27th century, when I was in London, all of old London was completely underwater, and the new place that was built on top of it essentially was built like a massive offshore rig kind of a thing, as a giant city. A giant floating city is what London will eventually become at some point.
Wow.
And,
not all of England, though.
no, not the whole of England, but definitely the southern coast.
So there's evidence of massive climatic shifts in the near future. I mean, not near, but what's the nearest that you've seen? Significant ones.
I know that by the early 22nd century, there were a lot of refugees from coastal regions in southern Asia that were having to flee inland or elsewhere entirely. From what I can recall, that's about it. That's about it as far as cataclysmic events, anyway.
No talk of pole shifts.
Not that I can remember.
What about major geopolitical changes, such as Russia, appropriating Ukraine and the Baltic countries?
From what I remember, this war completely drains Russia's economy to the point where they can no longer support the war, and then not long afterwards, they balkanize. Siberia becomes independent, Chechnya breaks off, and I believe Dagestan, where all the Jews live in Russia, that place eventually breaks off. Crimea stays part of Ukraine.
What happens to the U.S.?
Florida and California both break off eventually.
Florida is Florida not going to be submerged anyway because it's the lowest state?
Yeah, it will eventually, but in the intervening years, it's going to break off.
New England, is it going to be a union?
No, it'll stay pretty much the same.
Texas?
Some of the border areas with Texas will rejoin Mexico, and the rest of Texas stays in the Union, actually.
And this is near future?
Within the next 100 years.
And is it a sure thing, or could be changed?
No, it could be changed at any point. This is just from what I understand from my conversations with Alex about this. This is the most probable timeline, and It's one that doesn't interfere too much with Looking Glass and with the goals of the Tall Whites and all of that. So they're not going to go out of their way to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
But it could change at any time.
Right. So in conclusion, would you look at this? I mean, do you view the Looking Glass project as like a quest for wealth and power that's gotten out of control, or do you see it as more neutral?
I see it as having gotten out of control. And by this point in time, it's a largely unnecessary endeavor, but it's not going to stop either. So
it's not going to stop?
No, it's not. Until something very drastic happens and it's forced to.
Does Alex share this opinion?
No, he's all for it because he's the head of it.
I would have thought, yeah. So he's pretty proud of it.
He is.
Part of why you don't get along with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you would say that this timeline manipulation is not ethical, and you could say it constitutes cheating.
Absolutely.
And it should be just left
I
alone.
would say, for the most part, yes. I mean, some good things I can see probably being a good idea, like maybe going back and, like, I don't know, stopping genocides or something. Like, I could see that being a good thing, but in general, I don't think, frankly, I don't think that really any civilization, but humans especially, are not prepared for it, in my opinion.
No, yeah, you're probably right. But yeah, still, it's great to get some exposition on this for the first time, probably breaking ground here. So yeah, I would say that this will be the first of many recordings on this topic. And we really just scratched the surface. But yeah, we've been at it for 2+ hours. So yeah, good job. And hopefully we'll pick it up maybe with another program next time in Alter.
Something like that. Hopefully we can do that knocked off in Roundtable soon.
Yeah, I think it's overdue.